So today I'm talking about my new rig that I put together in the past month or so. Down here in Florida, you always seem to have downtime in January. It just comes with the weather, and so that's when I usually try to fix anything that needs attention or buy something that I might need. So anyway, I'm getting stuff ready for the spring break season coming up, and so I wanted to kind of go over some changes from the rig that I showed you guys in the other video. So that's a different concept, but it uses a lot of the same pieces. So I'm not going to go through it tone by tone. I'm just going to kind of do an overview of how everything is put together, and then you can watch the other video of the various sounds, because the sounds are all fairly similar except for the reverb, which is now different. Okay, so here's the new rig. It's kind of patterned off of an 88 speaker there with the 312s. Got a K120 on the top, an E120 in the middle, and the one on the very bottom is a PV Black Widow. The head is a Fender Twin 73, and it only has the preamp section. There's no power section. Then underneath that is a rack with various effects, SKB rack, and then a controller for the GCX that controls the pedals. And the power amp is a Crest Audio, and it is 300 watts per side, which is a real clean amp. And then I've got a Boss ME70 effects pedal that basically adds some chorus, it adds boost, it's got a good compressor in it that I use, and it's also a backup delay in case the other delay doesn't work. So here's the Twin, and I just did some modifications recently where I added a choke, and also I added a 100K power resistor on the first tube stage to kind of soften that up a little bit. And so I've got a little more compression now than I did before with those two changes to the amp. But I'm not using the spring reverb that went with the amp. I'm not using that anymore because it was noisy, and it's the most unreliable thing. It was the weakest link in the chain. So what I've got now is a spring reverb that's in a rack. And so it's a rack space reverb. It's called a Master Room. And so that's in a rack with the rest of the effects. So at the very bottom you've got a digital delay, and then I've got a pedal that controls the mix, and then there's the GCX switcher, which has the various loops in it for the pedals, and then left to right there's an EQ pedal there, a Qtron Microtron, a Super Distortion, and then the last one is overdrive / distortion. The OS2 is what that other one is. The first one's the OD1. So, and then I've got a GR50 Roland guitar synth there in the rack with the power amp. And so I'll be doing an episode on the guitar synth once I get that up and running. So that's the effects. Here's my loops. So you just hit the button and the loop kicks on and off. I ran it as a pedal board for a long time, and that works good too. I kind of committed to this when I went to the rack-mounted spring reverb. I like the spring reverb rack because it allows adjustment of highs, mids, and lows of the reverb. Coming over to this pedal, this has got compression, boost, chorus, and this is also the looper pedal that I was using earlier. And so this allows me to get a fatter tone, maybe more like a strat tone. That's kind of the way I look at it. With the compression, you get a kind of a strat tone, like early 80s would have been. And then when you use the boost, you kind of end up in like 84. And then with the compression, that's more like without a net, where it's a little bit fuller, but still fairly sharp. Probably the most full range. So. And with the chorus on this, I can do kind of bobby stomps also, like that intro to Let It Grow that I was doing there. So, yeah, it's kind of like blending vintage technology with a little bit of digital fun. So this is really a versatile rig. I can do a lot with this. It is really like, it's like a Swiss Army knife. It's got everything. Okay, so I've talked a lot so far about what I've been using, but now it gets down to the point of all of this. What does all this stuff do, and how does it interact with each other? That's really the key to all this. So in short, you've got tubes interacting with digital equipment and a lot of other gain stages along the way that you have to kind of be careful of. But this Fender Twin's running off of a couple low-powered tubes. There's not a lot of circuitry in this. It's very simple point-to-point wiring, and I've chosen different capacitors, different parts, all kinds of different things. The spring reverb is a rack-mounted unit that allows me to have more control over the reverb. I can have more highs, more lows. But it also kind of gives it more of a studio sound. It makes it kind of more that clean sound like Jerry kind of had in the early 80s, where it sounds real. You can really clean it up. I kind of had it fairly wet when I was playing earlier, but you can clean it up. Trust me, it'll clean up as clean as you need it to be. That's the neat thing about this rig, is it's basically got, I've got every combination from very, very clean, almost clinical sound to with the compression that gives it that strat sound. The boost kind of gives it a little that late 80s zip. Okay, so the other thing I was going to talk about is how the reason why I'm using this GCX switcher is because it just allows me to have all the pedals in one spot. I found this SKB case after the hurricane in a big pile, and so I just thought to myself, I'm like, well, it must be some kind of sign that it's time to get the GCX back out. And I just love it. It's you know, it's a little bit tricky to get it all set up, but it's not too bad in the long run. So that's pretty much it for the new rig. I kind of call it like my 88 rig. Just because it kind of looks a little bit like 88, because that's the same kind of cabinet, painted the same color as Jerry did in 88. But I always like that sound of without a net, an 89, 88, 89, 90 sound. And part of that is this Crest Audio. I had a Macintosh for a while, long time, for about 10 years I think. It was an MC2120. And I would bridge it to 240 watts, and it was pretty darn loud. It wasn't as loud as this. This is 300 watts per side, so this baby, and I've never even bridged this. So, but Jerry used one in the without a net sessions, basically, and I've often wondered if they ran a separate speaker off stage somewhere with that amp to a speaker and then recorded that, because the sound on the CD is not quite like the sound of the live shows that were recorded soundboard. Now the CD, of course, was done multi-track, but the guitar definitely sounds a little bit different. But Anyway, so it's a real clean sound. It's about, people say that the Crest audio is the closest thing you kind of could get to a tube amp at the time. Plus, I believe if you want it to sound like the 80s, well, use stuff that people would have used in the 80s. So yeah, this spring reverb, I haven't seen one of these before. Jerry used one in the 90s. So this is a little bit kind of almost like Jerry's 90s rig too, where you have just a tube preamp and a separate dedicated reverb. So that's what, to me, gives it a lot of flexibility. When I'm on a stage, if it's a boomy stage, I can just turn down the bass reverb and everything still comes through nice and clear. And then when I go to hit a low note, you know, like if I'm doing like a going down the road feeling bad thing and I want it to thumpy, you know, like that, I can always just reach down here, back off on the lows of the reverb, and it'll keep that low end mud from getting in the way of things, you know. So my theory is bring more power than you need, bring more speaker than you need, and bring more effects than you need, because with this I really don't have a limit to what I can do in my mind, because there's so many combinations of various effects that I can do. I'm always kind of imagining something in my head, and then I just search around until it sounds the way it's supposed to in my head, and then I just play for, you know, 3 minutes and just So one more thing I wanted to talk about is going to be doing some shows at Danny's Saloon in Fort Myers around spring break. And so if there's any bass players out there that are going to be coming into town over spring break, you know, that time frame, check out my email, send me an email, and I can let anybody know basically when we're going to be playing if they're coming down here. Also, if you're a bass player and you're living up north, like on your parents' couch, do your ex-girlfriend and your probation officer a favor and get out of town, come down here in Florida, and you can sleep on my couch or somebody else's, one of my other friends' couches, and have a fun time playing Grateful Dead jam band music. Because, you know, if we're all living in a simulation, then, well, I get to live in a Grateful Dead simulation where I get to play like Jerry every day and have a good time doing it, you know.